As the United Nations struggles to contain the mushrooming child rape scandals engulfing its disgraced peacekeeping troops, the Obama administration and its allies, including the Globalist Council on Foreign Relations, are plotting a major boost for the UN's military. The plan to supersize and further empower the global body's scandal-plagued armed forces, years in the making, is set to be unveiled at a global summit this month co-convened by Obama on the sidelines of the UN's 70th annual general debate. The White House has apparently already compiled a list of dozens of foreign governments and dictatorships that plan to support its controversial agenda. Whether the GOP-controlled Congress will also go along with it remains to be seen. Top Obama administration officials have been reaching out to foreign governments for at least a year on the initiative. On the sidelines of last year's UN General Assembly meeting, Vice President Joe Biden and UN boss Ban Ki-moon hosted a peacekeeping summit aimed at building up more global support for expanding the UN's military capabilities. Civil conflicts coupled with terrorism, organized crime and health crises such as Ebola are threatening millions of people, Ban told attendees in justifying the demands, suggesting that the UN now imagines itself to be a global law enforcement and anti-terrorism outfit as well. The UN chief also called for better coordination between UN forces and the militaries of emerging regional regimes such as the European Union and the African Union. The 2014 event attracted top officials from governments and dictatorships around the world. It followed the release of Obama's proposed 2015 budget demanding drastically increased funding for the UN and its military wing. Since then, Obama officials have been hard at work on the issue. According to news reports about the administration's efforts, the White House has been soliciting more support and UN troops from Western governments. It has also sought more backing and personnel from Russian strongman Vladimir Putin and the brutal Communist Party dictatorship enslaving mainland China, which currently contributes more personnel to UN peace missions than any other permanent member of the UN Security Council. Obama has also invited communist Chinese and Russian troops onto US soil for training for the first time in history. Among the UN military schemes being pushed by Obama, the CFR, and other proponents of a stronger UN military are the creation of a rapid reaction force, more technology and equipment, more troops, more power, and more funding. Currently, the UN has close to 150,000 troops deployed around the world in over a dozen peace missions plagued by murder of civilians, rape of children, and other atrocities. The history of savagery goes back to the very beginning of the UN's peace missions, when UN forces brutalized and terrorized the people of Katanga for refusing to submit to a communist dictator. American taxpayers pay by far the largest share of UN peace missions at about a third. Dozens of US officers are also already serving under UN command. But Obama wants more. US General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, apparently wants more, too. He is among the senior Obama officials assigned to push the agenda to drastically increase the size and power of the UN's peace military. Speaking to a UN gathering in July, Dempsey called on representatives of more than 100 governments and dictatorships to increase their support for UN peacekeeping schemes. UN troops have the responsibility to be role models and must be trained to preserve the dignity of the people they supposedly protect, General Dempsey was quoted as saying by the Wall Street Journal after his speech. Among other demands, Dempsey called for reforms including more UN troops and UN police from more countries, better equipment, better training, and the creation of the much-hyped Rapid Reaction Force to be deployed at a moment's notice when the UN demands it. The U.S. military chief did not specify exactly what new support Obama was planning to announce for the global military force at the upcoming summit. However, an anonymous U.S. official at Obama's mission to the UN told the Journal that by asking other governments to send more troops and military equipment to the UN, we will have to meet those standards ourselves. It was not immediately clear what constitutional or statutory authority the unnamed official believes would justify increasing U.S. taxpayer and military support without congressional authorization. But after waging a war against Libya under the UN's purported authority without even asking Congress, it is likely that the administration intends to act unilaterally if lawmakers refuse to join the bandwagon. Speaking at a UN Security Council briefing on peacekeeping operations in June, meanwhile, Obama's UN ambassador Samantha Power praised UN military officials for providing a powerful testament to the spirit that animates the United Nations. But more must be done, she said, adding that increased contributions by taxpayers and militaries around the world would not be enough. We all agree that we need to continue to broaden and deepen the pool of troop-contributing countries and increase contingents with niche capabilities to operate in challenging environments, continued Power, who has openly advocated surrendering even more U.S. sovereignty to the UN for over a decade. Discussing the upcoming peacekeeping summit to be hosted by Obama later this month, Power said the goal was to ensure that the UN can draw on the resources of contributing nations to fulfill the essential role played by UN peacekeeping to make it more responsive, more effective, and safer for civilians as well as for the peacekeepers who comprise these missions. She also blasted governments that put conditions on the UN's use of troops, saying it was unacceptable and that all forces under UN command must unquestioningly follow orders from their UN commanders. Perhaps she had former U.S. Army Specialist Michael New in mind. In the mid-1990 seconds, the patriotic American soldier refused to violate his oath of office by submitting to the UN or its foreign commanders. He also refused to wear the UN uniform. "I have a problem with that, because I am not UN," New was quoted as saying in 1995 by this magazine. "I explained this to my lieutenant and told him, 'Sir, I don't think I should have to wear a UN armband or a UN beret. I'm enlisted in the US Army. I am not a UN soldier. I have taken no vow to the UN. I have taken an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America from enemies foreign and domestic. I regard the UN as a separate power. Where does my oath say that I have to wear UN insignia?' For that, he was court-martialed and discharged from the service. If the globalist powerhouse known as the Council on Foreign Relations gets its way, though, there will likely be many more Mitchell news. Writing in Deferentian, CFR member and international affairs Professor Paul Williams praises Obama's agenda to further expand and empower the UN's forces. His first step should be to lead by example, Williams said, calling on Washington, D.C., to sacrifice the lives of more American servicemen in service to the UN's peacekeeping schemes. By deploying some of its own specialized military contingents as UN Blue Helmets, Washington could fill important UN capability gaps in rapid deployment, standing capabilities, in theater ground and aviation mobility, medical, engineering and logistics support, aid survivability, information and analysis, and expertise in transnational threats such as organized crime. Rather than sending more U.S. troops to serve the UN and further empowering the UN's scandal-plagued peace military, Congress should work to swiftly end all U.S. taxpayer funding and U.S. military support for the UN. From raping children across Africa and beyond to slaughtering unarmed protesters and trafficking sex slaves, the UN has a long and horrifying record of military peace missions. Widely ridiculed as the dictator's club, the last thing humanity needs is more money or more power for the UN. The American Sovereignty Restoration Act of 2015, our 1205, which would withdraw U.S. participation in the UN and evict the outfit from U.S. soil, is already sitting in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. In the meantime, lawmakers could use the upcoming budget to end all U.S. funding of the UN and its predatory military forces.